Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is year 0. Today, my buddy Jonathan Munnier joins the show once again. If you don't remember, Jonathan is a respiratory therapist that travels around and works at hospitals around the country and had talked to us about all his experiences and all the crazy shit he has seen during COVID-19. Well, Jonathan just got over his second bout of COVID, and he wanted to tell us what he found, how it was treated, and how it affected him. So I figured it would be as good a time as any with that Delta variant right on the tip of everybody's tongues to talk to Jonathan Munnier about his experiences having COVID-19 for the second time. But first, RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs. Go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a hell of a guy, a hell of a libertarian, a hell of an anarcho-capitalist, and a hell of a graphic designer. He designed my podcast logo and Pete Quinones' podcast logo for Free Man Beyond the Wall. So go to RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs and buy his fucking book, Project Manicore. Pretty goddamn good. And thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Enjoy the show. Okay. I am here with Jonathan Munnier, the respiratory therapist that I know. That's such a cool dude. And I'm so happy to get him on as he's coming off his quarantine for contacting the vid. He had the vid, man.
Again.
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 I thought you couldn't get it twice.
Yeah, well, yeah, you can. 'Cause, I don't really know what else to say other than that to put it any more elegantly. But unfortunately, yes, you can. And I think you're going to start seeing a lot more of that starting to fly around a little bit now that the Delta variant has been, kind of in mainstream news now for a while. And I'm still waiting to hear. They were supposed to have sent off my swab to also be tested to figure out which strain it was, which variant, whatever terminology you want to use. But I'm still waiting. I've called the Wyoming State Department of Health, I think 3 different times now, trying to get somebody on the phone to check on that. And well, you can imagine, I left messages and so far no response. So I know it's a shocker. But that's where things are at with that at the moment. My personal suspicion is that I probably had it, just because, I had my first round of COVID at the very beginning of the year. And even though I don't consider the symptoms I had the first time to be super severe, I felt like I just had, more of mild symptoms with, just kind of like a bad sinus infection, loss of taste and smell, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I've had sinus infections and stuff like that my whole life. So to me, it was mild, so I was kind of used to dealing with it, but I guess we'll see. What I'm getting at is I should have had antibodies still on board. Like I said, I feel like I still did regardless, just simply because this time around was even more mild. It was like super mild.
Yeah.
The only reason I went and got swabbed was because I started running 100.1 temp, started feeling just really tired. and started having the GI issues and stuff. And I was just like, yeah, shit, here we go again, and so that's the only reason I went and got swabbed. And luckily they went ahead and did a cepheid, the more accurate test, and went that route this time instead of one of the rapids. And so yeah, man, I go back to work tomorrow, and we'll see if I can manage to go ahead and collect the whole set, so to speak. I made a joke about that. I was gonna just shoot for collecting every strain. I've already if I end up having a couple of them already, I might as well go ahead for the other, go ahead and shoot for the other, like 16 or however the hell many there are now at this point. So
I mean, I thought you'd be safe if you weren't flying Delta.
Well, what are you drinking right now? Are you drinking a Corona?
I am drinking a Corona.
Well, there you go.
I always drink Corona whenever it's like super hot outside.
Yeah. Well, there you
when
go.
When I've been outside working and I'm sweaty, and I mean, seriously, my pants are soaked, my shirt's soaked, and I'm like, yeah, give me a Corona, give me something light that I can just enjoy.
Yeah, something that's like water anyway.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
the dam will break soon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, according to some people, I'm sure there's still people in the world that still think you're going to get the virus from drinking Corona. So, maybe you should go ahead and get swabbed, tomorrow too, just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, maybe.
But
I don't know. Somebody at work came down with it. They just told us yesterday that somebody at work came down with it, and I'm like, yeah, well, whatever. It's weird because, I told you the last time we talked, my dad got so sick, and he was sick for over a month, or right at a month. But it was all GI related. There was no flu symptoms or anything like that. And my mom never tested positive for it, not once. And but my dad is still trying to fully recover. I mean, he's gone and seen a specialist and had all sorts of blood tests and this, that, and the other done to him. And I mean, he's like, he told me the other day, he goes, man, it's crazy if you live long enough, they turn you into a lab rat. And I was like, yeah, I guess, he's finally starting to feel better, because what they wanted to do is they took him off his testosterone, and then they didn't want to put him back on it. And so when he went and saw the specialist, the specialist was like, no, you need to get back on testosterone. Like, that's part of your issue. And so that started helping. Then they put him on like prescription strength B12 and like all this stuff, all these supplements, and it really started helping him out. But it's just strange the way that they're still dealing with this whole situation, as if, I mean, you already got the emergency, declaration, so you could use your goddamn vaccines wherever the hell you want to use them. Let us start treating the fucking symptoms, start treating the virus, and that's when I remember I was listening to, I think I sent you the video. It was a doctor, talking to Tucker Carlson, and he's a doctor here from Texas. And he's like, the biggest thing that I have an issue with is they're not treating this. Nobody's even attempting to treat it. We know ivermectin works pretty well. Like, start trying to treat the fucking virus and quit just lollygagging, and telling people, oh, we'll just go rest for 15 days, as if like the Lord Jesus is going to come down and lay his hands upon you, in those 15 days. I mean, the damn doctors have turned into these freaking, medicine men. This is all like a spiritual thing to them now. It's really strange.
Yeah, and maybe I can shed light on I shouldn't use that terminology. Maybe I can expound on more observations that I've made since the last time we talked.
Yeah.
Well, first off, I think I should just go ahead and mention too that I'm sure that I mentioned this to you before in our text, but my doctor was actually nice enough to go ahead and write me an ivermectin script for this time around.
Oh, okay.
And I'm still very thankful that he was open to that.
Yeah.
Because he was recommending a couple things, and I was communicating with his nurse and stuff over messaging through the MyChart app. Since pretty much where I go is on the Epic system, pretty much. So most hospitals are nowadays. But anyway, yeah. So I sent a message and was just like, look, I've been doing a lot of research, and kind of like just whatever spare time that I have, and I was just like, is there any way that he would be open to writing me a script for ivermectin, just simply because I've read that the side effects are next to none, very minimal, and it's one of those like very next to no chance of loss, but everything to gain kind of situations. So I've been kind of jumping on, I shouldn't say jumping on the bandwagon, but I've been very impressed by what I've read about that, some of the studies. And, I'm like so many other people too, that saw the recent Rogan podcast with Dr. Corey, I believe. And, I think it was him and Weinstein that was on that episode not too long ago, and they were very much championing for it. And, which is all well and good, but, it's once again, even the people that have worked with it and are not, have kind of dealt with it hands-on in a, in the ICUs or whatever direct patient care environment, you still, I mean, the last few places I've been still, even, it's just like, there's still no consistency, on any kind of treatment regimen, even though all this literature is out there now. It's been a year. It's still amazing to me how just overall, I guess I could technically use the word ignorant, that, so many physicians and patients are, to a lot of these different treatment regimens, simply because they, for whatever reason, haven't been allowed to be brought to the kind of forefront of, kind of the mainstream yet, as far as just what people are allowed to be exposed to information wise. It's still vaccines, mass, social distance. So that's all you ever hear, so I was a little skeptical at first, especially once I started doing a little bit of homework on it, ivermectin, being ivermectin, and, finding out that, hey, it's okay, this is an anti-parasitic drug. It's kind of interesting, but I'm like, okay, well, if somebody that's been working for the last 11 to 12 months in a direct ICU environment is sitting here saying that they've got all this data, I'll give it a chance. I'll read it. And so I got on the website, that COVID-19 criticalcare.com website, with, a lot of that study information that's on it, and looked at the data for myself. And I was just like, okay, well, if I end up with it again, then I'll ask for it. And that's all I can do. I mean, it's, unfortunately, as a patient, you're still at the mercy of what your physician is kind of willing to write you prescription wise. So, point being, he was nice enough to write it. It was a minimum dose for not a very long duration, but what I found was I started taking it approximately 5 days into my symptoms. And granted, I have to disclose too that I did take, an anti-runs, med, before I took my first dose of the ivermectin. But the thing is last time I had COVID and I had the GI symptoms along with the respiratory, like the sinus infection stuff.
Right.
I tried taking that stuff before also, and like anti-runs meds usually never do anything for me. They don't touch me at all, ever. So I took one dose, didn't take any more, and took my first 2 doses of ivermectin within a 24-hour period. So in the afternoon the first day, and then in the morning the next day. And what I can say with it literally, any mild symptom I had already was gone within 24 hours. And this is just me, of course. Like I said last time we talked, everything I'm talking about now is just from my point of view and, just from my personal experiences and stuff. But that being said, I was very impressed, even with just like the smaller 3 milligram dose. Just 2 of those doses within that 24-hour time period, my GI symptoms had improved dramatically. And maybe that was because I also had the anti-runs med on board and it had knocked down the viral symptoms enough to actually allow it to work this time or something. I don't know. Right. All I can tell you is, after that one dose and not taking another dose again, I was back to kind of pretty much normal over the span of the next, couple days after that. Mm-hmm. So it's made a believer out of me. But I am just me and I can only speak for me. However, I do know of multiple other people now who have taken it and had no side effects and have had substantial improvements with their symptoms within a very short amount of time. So I'm convinced, just from my personal experience and the experiences of other people that I know personally with it, that, I'm sold on it. I'm not going to sit here and, I like my view on any kind of medication or vaccination is pretty much universal. Like, I'm never going to sit here and tell you or anybody that you should or shouldn't take this or inject that or whatever. Right. But what I do feel confident in saying is that you're probably doing yourself somewhat of a disservice if you don't at least ask about it and become informed about it. Right. There's nothing that you're going to lose by educating yourself a little bit on a specific drug, in this case being ivermectin, I think. And you potentially have a lot more, to gain for sure. If you end up with it and, it's the only thing that I think that just sucks is that, there's still so many people that I know, doctor and practitioner wise, that still never even heard of the drug. I hadn't even heard of the drug until recently, within the last couple months. Right. And to me, why? Why? Why haven't, people wonder why conspiracy theories and crap get started, mm-hmm. and what are people supposed to think whenever there is sufficient evidence? Doctors have testified before the Senate and other, governmental bodies or whatever the case may be, presented evidence and data, and it's not allowed, not only not really allowed to be brought out to the forefront, but not even hardly even recognized or listened to or acknowledged. What are people supposed to think? But anyway, yeah. So like I said, I was officially done with quarantine on yesterday or Sunday. I've been fine. The only thing that sucked is just whatever higher power you want to believe in. They obviously still hate me to some degree because like we were talking about earlier, my the Airbnb that I'm staying at right now decided to have its sewage, the sewer line get clogged and backed up during this little escapade of mine. So literally, it's been a shitty couple weeks, literally and metaphorically. It's that, and then I'm still dealing also with trying to get my my company and Wyoming on the same page for workers' comp, and because that's the thing that sucks, especially about contract work. At least if you're in a hospital, sometimes some hospitals have policies where they'll just pay. Some employers have or some some employers will have policies where they'll just pay people to be off with COVID or whatever. In my situation, being a contract worker, and in my situation, I don't get shit. I've got to file for workers' comp. So, so I'm dealing with that right now, and that's been kind of a pain. I'm sure it'll get sorted out at some point, but it's been interesting, man. It's just been a kind of one frustration after another, the last couple of weeks, but overall, I mean, I think that, if there's anything that I want anybody to at least take from this conversation is, if anybody comes down with it, at least ask about ivermectin. Worst case scenario, your doctor gets a little educated too, even if he or she wants to even blow it off or whatever after the fact. At least it's in their mind a little bit after that, and then if the studies and the literature that have kind of been, for whatever reason, not published before now, become published and, becomes, common knowledge in the healthcare community on how to, use it as a standard course of treatment sometime over the course of this year, then those doctors can go back and say, oops, or whatever, or at least rethink their strategies so that, it just boggles my mind, man. It's like, there's obviously treatment methods that people are still ignorant to for whatever reason, that, even in the short time, because I mean, it wasn't just too awful long ago that we talked. I mean, it's only been a handful of months or so, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and even, yeah. And
I think it was,
supposedly
April. I think we talked in April.
Yeah.
I released the episode in early May. We talked in late April.
Sounds about right. Yeah. Sounds about right. Yeah. And it's just amazing, what you can find out in such a short amount of time, and how much more kind of pissed you can get in a short amount of time, also, especially with everything else that's come to light, and how people are kind of treating, the statistics and things that are being reported, on the VAERS site, and all that fun stuff associated with the vaccinations. So
yeah, I know a lot of people personally that have suffered severe trauma from the vaccines. I'm not going to put any names out there, but there's a lady that was perfectly healthy, 65 years old, got the vaccine, ended up with 2 clots in her lungs, and now she's on oxygen permanently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, a friend of mine's sister's mother-in-law died the next morning, just in the bathtub, sitting there dead in the bathtub.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah. I've had cousins that got severe infections in their kidneys or their bladder. I can't remember exactly, but severe infections, and were hospitalized for these infections. So you start looking at this and you're like, are the side effects of this vaccine or whatever the hell they're shooting people up with, there's so much narrative around that within itself. It's like, is it worth the trouble? I mean, I've known guys that were probably my age, 40, 45 years old, perfectly healthy guys, got the vaccine and were laid up for 2 weeks. And it's like, is it worth it? Because you're not really at risk at 45 years old if you're healthy, And so,
yeah.
I mean, and nobody, and we can't identify, nobody's gone as far as identifying what this thing is. I remember reading an article by a doctor. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Dr. James Lyons Weiler. But they were talking about the nasal swabs that they're using. A lot of times are picking up like dead remnants of a cold virus that was a coronavirus, and it's registering it as a coronavirus, and then they're treating you as if you've had COVID, and it's like, okay, but you don't have any, solid facts that this was COVID. Like, we're just going off the fact that it's just random coronavirus, which there's how many thousands of these things out there?
Sure. Well, and it's not really much different than the antibody tests they do also. There's no distinguishing between what kind of corona, like it can't tell if it's a, COVID-19, like coronavirus. It doesn't specify. The antibody test just says, okay, you've had a coronavirus, you've got antibodies to coronavirus. Like, it doesn't specify what type. So, if you get an antibody test also, you could have just had a common cold or whatever as well. None of that kind of stuff is changed. My outlook overall on everything is pretty similar. I've, like I said, after seeing how, some other places have kind of dealt with, I've seen everything from, okay, still to this day, pretty much like, okay, here's an inhaler, here's some supplemental oxygen, go home, ride it out, all the way up to, like the more severe cases, even using, ECMO and treatments like that, which I don't know if you know what ECMO is, but that's ECMO is whenever it's extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. Corporeal is hard for me to pronounce, so sorry. It's kind of like rural, but yeah, it's basically where they attach you to a machine and bypass basically your blood flow out of your body through an oxygenation machine, and then pass it back through your body. And I've seen that, a couple of places use that pretty hardcore as a treatment method still, and I'm just like, at that point I'm just like, what's the point? I was just like, you're pretty, your odds, like, why put somebody through all that much more? I guess if it's the person's decision, they want everything possible done, then it's on them, to have that decision or whatever. Right. But good Lord, if I end up on the vent and, that's like one of the last, just, just let me go, it's just kind of, you're kind of almost past the point of no return, at that point. But
yeah. Have they even figured out like how to ventilate people without killing them at the same time?
Yeah. The treatment methods with all that have become pretty commonplace and pretty standard, I would say. The last time we talked, you remember we kind of discussed non-invasive ventilation, and that's what you're seeing more often than not. Luckily doctors got wizened up pretty quick to the fact that vents are a big no-no, with this kind of thing. And as well they should be. Mechanical ventilation should be your absolute last resort pretty much for most scenarios. What you're seeing now is a lot of high flow oxygen therapy and a lot of BiPAP and, non-invasive ventilation forms. And go ahead.
I just have a question, because you said BiPAP and it just made me think of my dad. One of the things that has come out of this, him having all these tests run on him, is they've discovered that he has sleep apnea.
Right. Uh-huh.
So they put him on a CPAP machine, and it's the one with the nostrils. He it's like 4 hours into it, he wakes up in the middle of the night and rips those things out of his nose. He's like, it just starts hurting him, or it's putting so much. He says either starts making his nose raw, like really raw, and he just can't tolerate the pain, or he'll say sometimes it'll be pumping so much oxygen into him that his mouth is full of oxygen and he can't breathe because there's so much, coming at him, and so I'm wondering if there are any tests or relevant studies done that show this is creating more people with sleep apnea, or if this is a contributing factor to how people react to the virus. Because like I said, he didn't have any lung problems. He didn't show any signs of any lung issues when he was tested positive for COVID. But and he wasn't running a very high fever. And at that time, I don't know if they've changed it any, but at that time they weren't doing anything with people that didn't have a high fever. So they just told him to go home and sleep. So he was sleeping 15 hours a day for 30 days,
Mm-hmm.
And now in the wake of all this, he's having all these tests done and he's finding all these new things that he didn't know what was wrong with him.
So much of the focus of my podcast is to point out abuses of power and how bad things have gotten and the direction in which we're heading as a society. And it can be a real black pill. I've partnered up with Richard Grove to offer my listeners an opportunity to sign up to his Autonomy Course. The Autonomy Course is designed for people looking for solutions, people that want to shape their own future, people that are not willing to be at the behest of large corporations or the United States government or the banking system. The Autonomy Course is designed for those of you who wish to have complete control of the reins of your life, who are looking to be successful, to thrive and not just survive, to provide for your family by utilizing your existing skills and learning how to market and sell those skills in order to be your own boss, or learn new skills in order to leverage that into a new career opportunity. So if there's a job out there you've been trying to get or you've been wishing you could get, but you just don't have the skills for it, the Autonomy Course is the place for you to start, to learn how to land that position, to learn how to market yourself better, to gain confidence, and to be surrounded by a community of like-minded people that will encourage you and help you along the way. So use my affiliate links and go check out the Autonomy Course. It could be right for you.
Well, I can pretty much tell you just from my experience that there's a very good chance that he already had sleep apnea. Sleep apnea in a lot of cases has nothing to do with lung problems. It's an airway problem. And the main contributing factors to sleep apnea are usually like obesity, whether or not, some people just naturally have more tissue in their, oropharynx, the back of their throat.
Mm-hmm.
I did sleep studies for about 2 years and did some more recently again, this assignment. But it's weird. I've done sleep studies before on patients that were 400 pounds that were mild, if any, really. Because see, the thing about sleep apnea that a lot of people don't realize is most people have it. It's just to what degree.
Right.
And, technically obstructive sleep apnea is defined as having, 5 episodes, of either hypopneas or apneas, like per hour or more.
Yeah.
And most people, either breathe shallow a certain amount of times, or, sometimes they'll stop breathing for short pauses, especially sometimes during REM sleep. is whenever you hit REM sleep, your body hits paralysis, basically. Like it's, but you're asleep. So it's, your body's kind of like, that's why people, a lot of times that have, disorders of sleep terrors and things like that, or, whatever it is, it messes, it messes with their mind because they're actually kind of semi-conscious whenever they're dreaming and hitting that, state of sleep paralysis, and, sometimes it's pretty scary, obviously. But everybody pretty much usually breathes worse when they're asleep, when they're on their back and when they're in REM sleep, because not only, are you in a state of paralysis, but you got gravity working against your airway, whenever you're in REM sleep. So, you're going to have a lot more of those types of episodes usually, on average, whenever you're, in deep REM sleep. But, I've had 400, I've had 400-pound people that have been mild, if any, and then I've also had, twigs come in that were severe. I mean, we're talking like, sometimes even triple digits, amount of times of that they're either breathing shallow or stopping breathing completely, for 10 seconds at a time, at least. And it's more of an anatomy issue than it is a lung issue, or more of an airway anatomy issue, with your airway collapsing and stuff like that, more so than anything else. Like I said, that's why obesity plays into a factor, because you've got extra weight, obviously, and extra tissue. Bodybuilders, pretty hardcore bodybuilders and people like that can have it as well, because they've, thickened up their traps and neck, so much to the point where, they've got so much surrounding tissue around their airway also. Football players, you don't have to be, an out of shape fat ass, just, to have, you got pro athletes and people like that have it too. So to answer your question, my guess is it was always there, or at least has been there probably for a while. Just speaking in generalities, of course. But ironically enough, that's how a lot of people, and they don't have to be in the hospital for COVID. I've seen them, people in long.
Well, he wasn't in the hospital. He would just, like I said, what happened with my dad was after COVID, he never did regain his energy. He just, it just never came back. So you were talking about basically 6 months of a man that was constantly active all the time. By Wednesday, 7 p.m., he was done for the week. Like, I'm not doing anything else. I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
And my mom was super concerned. Like, she's like, she told me it felt as if it had aged him like 20 years.
Yeah. Well, and how much better did you say he got after they put him back on his supplements and everything else that he was supposed to be taking? Is it marginal, or is it marked? Is it like
he says he feels back to normal?
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure a good amount of that too was probably, just like you said, the hormones and or whatever else you said he was on the test. You said testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal. It's amazing how much taking someone away from their normal routine treatment regimen can affect stuff. It really, really can.
Yeah, they added prescription B12 to his intake, and then they added something else, and I can't remember what it was, but it had actually made him feel like shit for probably about 2 weeks, and then I want to say it had something to do with his kidney or his liver, but they had put him on something that made him feel bad for a couple of weeks, but after he got over that and kind of got used to taking the medication, his body kind of adjusted to it. Yeah. He's like, yeah, I feel great. I feel fine.
Cool. Yeah, it's but like I said, man, it's been interesting. There's still a lot of doctors, I think, that are choosing to just kind of go by, whatever, and there's some that have been, pretty hardcore in the ICU and critical care setting that have tried a myriad of things and found cocktails that have worked, treatment regimens and stuff that have worked, which is, obviously how the ivermectin stuff kind of came to light.
Right.
And, then there's still a large amount of people operating by a lot of outdated information too. And, like I said, but as far as getting back to your original question, they found that the non-invasive ventilation aspect was still the best way to go because, the patient's still having to do the work on their own. It's keeping their muscles of inspiration, still active. And, as soon as you start breathing for somebody, everything like the muscles that they use, to breathe, they start atrophying. And, you're also introducing a foreign airway that also introduces, potentially other bugs. You're also introducing forced pressure into lungs that are already irritated and inflamed, which is going to further, most respiratory pathologies and make things worse. So, who knows? I hope that they discover something even better or even more efficient than ivermectin or whatever the case might be, to kind of give a ray of hope to the more severe cases, because, it's a bummer. It's a bummer just sitting there and watching people like deteriorate and, just feeling like there's not really much you can do about it, especially whenever you're working with doctors that, they're only willing to try what they have, I don't know, just either been introduced to in their limited experience on their own, and, whatever the case might be, and, it's frustrating, and it's very frustrating. So, like I said, I'm hoping that, that at some point in the near future that, all that stuff will be kind of allowed to be, I don't know. I guess you can usually just say the healthcare gods, so to speak, will anoint their blessing on such treatment method. And, like I said, it's,
does anybody have Dr. Fauci's number?
Yeah. Well, and it was funny too. It was hilarious you brought that up because, my doctor even made a joke, when I told the nurse and stuff, thanks for writing the script, and I was giving feedback to her to give to my doctor. She says, and I quote, maybe you can tell, write Dr. Fauci and tell him about your experiences. and I said, well, if I thought it would make a damn bit of difference, I'd be more than happy to, but, something tells me that that's not gonna matter.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, man, it's interesting. I hope that, that more of the research is allowed to come to light on a bunch of different stuff. But
so from your experience, like, is there a really big difference between these variants? Like, when somebody comes in, do you even have a clue that they have a different variant than the one that was predominantly, operating?
No. Yeah.
So what's going on with this? Like, why are we being fed these variant, kind of narratives?
Your guess is as good as mine on that, man. My guess is it's because it's another narrative. All you're pretty much told for the most part, is that, they're just COVID positive. You go in to treat somebody and the, what's usually an even, bigger bitch half the time too, is, you go in, you treat somebody and do something with the patient or whatever, and then find out after the fact that they're, that they're positive or whatever. And just kind of get into the habit of wearing an N95 into like any ER room you go into or whatever the case is,
right,
just for the extra, just the extra measure of protection and, precaution. But they might put something in the patient's chart later on after the fact, what kind of strain it is or whatever. But honestly though, to my knowledge, you're not going to treat them any different. It doesn't matter if they've got the Delta variant or one of the older, one of the older types or, more common types, whatever the case is. Most people aren't, they're not going to treat them any different. The way they're going to treat him is the way they're going to treat him. That's why I think that, especially with, with more knowledge coming to light, as far as these more proficient treatment methods, I think that they're going to become even all that much more important because, with, going back to ivermectin again, that's pretty much what they used in India to pretty much wipe out and clean out the wards for all the people that had the Delta variant in India. Within like a couple of weeks, their hospitals were way better off, if you're believing the literature and what's been reported, whenever you go to look for that information, because, that information is something else that you don't really find to be commonplace either. You kind of got to go look for it, but, to answer your question, most of the time, no, you don't, I use my prior example also. I've tried contacting the State Board of Health, here like 3 different times, and I still can't get somebody on the phone to tell me what my strand is or what my strain is,
Right.
So, all that information pretty much gets ciphered through the, through the state board, and, it gets, like I said, all that stuff gets sent off and analyzed and reported back after the fact, usually. It might be different in other places in other states. I don't know, but, the couple places that I've been knowledgeable to kind of the process, just like, that's pretty much my understanding of how it works anyway. But yeah, whether or not they have the variant or one of the more common strains or whatever, you're not really going to treat them any different. So, but,
well, and I know,
answers your question really.
I know a lot of people, I say a lot, probably a handful of people over the last month that have come down with COVID. And most of them say, oh, it sucks. It sucks. But they didn't feel like they were dying. And, it's pretty typical for a virus as it mutates and becomes more in part of society, part of kind of the norm, that it's actually less fatal as it mutates, because the virus is trying to keep itself alive and move from host to host to host to host. And so it makes me wonder if just naming all these new variants is just a way to continue the kind of fear mongering within the public, because almost every year there's a new variant of the flu. And I think the UK is the only country in the world that has running commercials that says, you may know somebody that has the flu, and tries to use that in some fearful way.
Yeah. And, it kind of goes back to what I originally said also, is what are people that actually want to give this some thought? Like, what else are they really supposed to think? Like, what other conclusions are you supposed to come to other than, propaganda and fear mongering? Whenever, I've had it twice now, and, like I said, it was all the other life inconveniences around it that sucked way more than having the actual virus.
Right.
Let's face it. I think what the basic narrative that I think has been lost on people a lot during this whole last year and a half or so is nobody wants to be sick. It doesn't matter if you've got a common cold, a sinus infection, COVID, the flu. It sucks to be sick. Honestly, the times that I have wanted to die the most in my life is whenever I've had the really bad GI bugs that go around every year that, you're shooting out both ends, and literally just, looking for a sharp object in the bathroom to impale yourself on, just to friggin' end it,
Right.
those are some of the worst illnesses I've ever had. I mean, I've had to leave work before puking, just hoping that, it was out of my, I had enough out of my gut long enough just so I could make it home before the next bout began, like I felt way more sick having those kind of GI bugs than COVID, but once again, everybody's system, everybody's system reacts differently to every kind of illness and every kind of medication. And, what you're going to react to more severely is different probably than what I'm going to react to more severely. Nobody wants to be sick. It's not fun. Nobody likes having their life and their plans disrupted in any way, shape, or form, so I think the whole world can agree that being sick blows, I mean, it's not any fun, but, I mean, the fact of the matter is like you said, I mean, there's going to be tons more of variants and, mutations. And, it's just going to pretty much boil down to when the world says enough, basically, when the world has had enough and finally says, look, let us make our own decisions on how we want to conduct our lives. If we want to take the risk of going out and being around people, whether we're vaccinated or not, or whatever the case is, just let us do what we want to do again, and I think that's the most unfortunate part in all this is so many people have just kind of been, willing just to be like, to have a convenient excuse to not have to be put themselves in, what they've deemed now to be kind of compromising positions of being around, other people in society, over all this. And, I mean, like I said, I mean, I just, I don't understand that whole kind of voluntary, victim mentality. You know what I mean? I've never really been able to, I don't know, never really been able to kind of relate to that. So, I mean, people have asked me, what my thoughts are on the vaccination stance and stuff now that I've had it twice. And I'm like, it ain't changed. Sorry. I mean, I mean, to be honest, I still think that the reason why this time was, like I said before, was so mild was because I still had antibodies on board. But yeah, I mean, I think that unfortunately that's the only way that we're going to beat any virus or any kind of illness for the most part that is like this in nature, is to let it, run its course to a certain degree and, just live life as normal. And, just whatever happens in the meantime, quite frankly, is just kind of on us, I mean, that's the sad reality. And, we'll see what happens, I guess. I mean, I know Australia is already back on lockdown again, but.
Well, they keep, they've shifted the narrative, over the last year and a half. They no longer talk about COVID deaths. Now they talk about COVID cases. And any thinking person that's paying attention to the way the narrative is presented would look at that and be like, okay, so are not enough people dying for you to scare everybody? So now you just have to talk about cases and, because the amount of deaths just aren't effective.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you're partially right for sure. I mean, the other partial, right or wrong, I don't think we'll ever know, because unless we're in the room making the decisions for everybody else, we're not going to hear or really know for sure exactly what kind of conversations were being had, but I mean, as far as, they're going to keep trying, when I say they, I mean, the governments in power or, whoever are in positions of authority above other people, they're going to keep trying to do whatever they feel that they need to do to, do whatever they want, I guess. I mean, just to speak in super general terms, but the thing is you and I can only do so much about that.
Right.
And, we can only make decisions for ourselves that we feel are in our best interests and, within our power to do, basically. So, my hope is that, nothing too major is going to come along and threaten the ability to at least still have that amount of control over our lives. But yeah, I mean, as far as the narrative shifting, I mean, it's kind of funny because it started with case numbers and then kind of went to deaths, and kind of like you said, now it's back to case numbers again. But, I think that's why the Delta variant narrative is being pushed so hard again, is because, they saw how quickly people stopped, wearing masks and kind of wanted things to go back to the way they were. And so now they've kind of got to reintroduce the pattern again. It's kind of just kind of what my observations are and how things have kind of transpired, at least over the last few months, especially, so now that everything's lax again, and you've got, Surgeon General supposedly coming out and saying that the CDC was premature on lifting their mask mandates and this, that, and the other, and whatever. And so now, you got to introduce these percentages and these case numbers, that are linking to this particular variant and this, that, and the other. And I'm sure that the narrative will probably shift to deaths again at some point. But I mean, you can only really go back and forth between a couple things, really. I mean, it's like case counts and deaths and, vice versa, So, I mean, who knows, man? I mean, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the year plays out. I've been saying that for a while now, but,
here in Texas, I mean, honestly, if it weren't constantly something I saw on Twitter, I would have forgotten all about COVID by now. Like, it's just like, it's not a part of my life. It has nothing to do with me. Like I said, a guy at work got it. But as far as I'm concerned, he got a cold or a flu. Like, okay, whatever,
Yeah. Well, I mean, the way I still kind of continue to choose to view all this stuff is, I still think from the very beginning, they should have pretty much let every place take a localized approach on how they want to, to approach, how they want to deal with this situation, instead of just, making just huge across the board mandates, because, what's going to be really effective or necessary in Evansville, Indiana, isn't going to be the same for like Indianapolis, Indiana, for example.
Right.
Because I mean, they're two completely different size places, and one's more spread out than the other, whatever. I mean, more the freedom to allow more localized approaches would have been much better, I think. And what I never understood from the beginning too was, we're supposed to be able to be allowed to kind of vote and have a say in our society to a certain degree, right? When it comes to all this stuff, like, why didn't they really wanted to like wash their hands of the situation. I mean, they really could have just allowed a vote, people to, maybe vote on whether or not they wanted these mandates or not, and instead of just giving all these executive powers to, state governments and things like that. It's just like, well, why weren't the people from the very beginning allowed to really have a say in their own destiny with all of it, so to speak? Like, why didn't they just allow it to be put to a vote or something like that, And
the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
The Patriot Act set the precedent. Like, you no longer have a say if there is something that the government considers an emergency. And that, I mean, whether it's terrorism, like from foreign countries, or it's fine, baby. Dogs have a empty bag of food down on the floor they're making noise with, and she's like, "I'm gonna pick it up. That's fine." Like, whatever. That's
Yeah.
part of the show. Like the dogs are
Yeah.
always part of the show. But
Anymore, yeah.
yeah, no, like whether it's you know, Sunni Muslim extremist, you know, jihadist, you know, terrorism, or it's viral terrorism, or now everybody's talking about domestic terrorism, you know. So it's the if it's an emergency, then you don't have a say. You've given the government the power to make these decisions for you.
Yeah, I don't know. It sucks. I had almost, believe it or not, kind of forgotten about the different provisions and all that. I mean, I obviously remember that from, you know, the Bush administration and, you know, everything that happened with 9/11. It's been interesting that, you know, that's been pretty much passed on from from presidential change or presidential administration change to change the last several times. But I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. You know, it's easy to forget about those things whenever, you know, it's so,
It becomes
you
the
know,
norm.
yeah, it's
It
hidden in
becomes
plain
the norm,
sight.
but they never forget about the power they have. Oh, you gonna
Sure.
come say hi? You gonna come say hi? Tell him hi. Tell him hi. Look, Jonathan's right there. Say hi. Come on. Come up here. See? Now he can see you.
Nice.
But
Awesome. Yeah.
big goofy
Yeah.
ass motherfucker.
Feel you.
We gotta take him tomorrow to get a sausage biscuit from Whataburger.
Nice.
Yeah. Since we're no longer on the road, he no longer rides with me, and he's like, he doesn't know what to think. I leave every day now, and he's like, "What the fuck's going on?"
Yeah, I was wondering kind of how you deal with that. I feel bad because, you know, abandoning my two Vizslas at home for months at a time makes me feel guilty also, but you know, it is what it is. But
Well, he's got his brother here. There, I mean, we got two of them from the same litter. One of them stayed with my wife, and he rode with me from the time he was 5 weeks old, and then and then I got to deal with this when I get home. He wants to climb all over me and chew on me, but yeah, man, I'm ready to wrap it up. We've been going around an hour, and I'm getting tired, man. I ain't gonna lie to you.
I can
So
tell, man.
What do you got as far as closing statements go?
Nothing, man. I mean, like as far as anything major, not a whole lot. I mean, I still kind of stand by the majority of what we talked about before. Like I said, the main thing that I wanted to share this time around was just, you know, a few other minor observations and you know, the big one, of course, being the personal experience with ivermectin and, you know, putting my money where my mouth was as far as, you know, trying to be in a position to, you know, really, you know, kind of buy into the, you know, see whether or not, you know, the literature was accurate, you know, and was going to be accurate with a personal experience. So I'm glad that I decided to kind of take that plunge. And I would encourage everyone listening to at least look into it, especially if you're wanting alternative. Excuse me. If you're wanting an alternative, you know, possibilities to the jabs and all that stuff. You know, I still think that eventually, you know, I mean, as soon as they introduce one that I feel comfortable using, you know,
Right.
I may, you know, I'll probably still get a jab at some point. I've been kind of keeping my eye, and before we get off here, have you been kind of following at all the other one they've been, the other like main fourth type that they've been developing? I forgot the name of it.
I knew there was a new one, but I've just lost all interest in all this crap. I'm kind of I'm just kind of like, just leave me alone. Leave me alone.
Trust me, I'm pretty much the same way. But I find what I've been reading, the couple things that I've read about it, I've found to be intriguing. You know, but yeah, I mean, like I said, man, that's my main takeaway from this is just, never stop looking into new things, and you never know when you're going to stumble on a new bit of information that you can find to be useful. So in this case for me, it was the ivermectin, and I would definitely encourage pretty much anybody to at least ask about it and educate yourself on it. And I mean, it's been interesting to see how, like that. I remember that one study that you sent to me, that one article that you sent to me also, about how they have kind of discovered that it's COVID is more of a vascular virus versus a respiratory virus. And
Right.
I've done a little bit more homework into that also. And that's made complete and total perfect sense as well.
Yeah.
The more I've kind of looked into that also. So thanks for sending that to me forever ago.
That was my mom. That was my mom going, have you seen this? And I said, no, let me send it to Jonathan and see what he has to say about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did, because it got my wheels spinning, and it kind of caught me off guard a little bit. And that's why whenever I was texting you back and forth, like I was kind of like looking at it from a different point of view initially. And I was just like, well, I'm really glad that he sent me this, because, now that I'm like, I read that, and you remember kind of our text conversation back and forth, I was just like, wow, this actually really makes complete and total sense, from what I've seen in the clinical environment. It's why everybody's reacting to it so much differently, and, doing everything from throwing clots to having other issues to whatever, but yeah. So anyway, man, thanks for having me on again. And, if nothing else, just to, catch up again for a short amount of time. And man, like I said, I appreciate it, but
it was enjoyable. Plug away, man. Plug everything. Where you at?
Yeah, man. I'm just still mainly my website is jonathanmunnier.com. So JonathanMunnier.com. Most of my basic stuff is on that. And like I said, if you want to search the Too Many Strings podcast, and if you want to get a little bit more information about falconry or hear falconry stories, just you can search Falconry Told, that podcast. I mean, you can get both of those podcasts pretty much any main platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, man, other than that, that's pretty much it. So thanks again, and go to sleep, man. get a shower and go to bed.
Right. Well, hang on one second. I'm gonna close down the recording. I want to talk to you for 1 second.
Sure.
Boogie.
You wanna be a hero, instead you're just a slave. All your good intentions took you to your grave. Your pride is how they killed you, with the flag you wave just like a fool. They promised you a mountain, gifted you a stone. They demanded that you throw it into your neighbor's home, and then seize all that they worked for and give it to the throne just like a tool. Well, as we all just stand in line and glorify new ways of being cruel, it seems to me humanity is not something that they're teaching us in school. They dumbed us down all around, propaganda, their pollution. They set a cage up on the stage, a facade for all solution. They build a wall, block them all from this mental institution. It's insane. Now they're writing their own rule books, and they're crossing all their T's. They're fashioning their people to all wear beggars' knees. If you want a clean drink of water, well, you must say pretty please. It's all a game. As we all just stand in line and justify these crimes done in our names, it seems to me authority and tyranny are both one and the same. Well, it's time to change the channel. It's time to set things right. Make them all rot with fear in their beds at night. Devour all their worthless souls and sacrificial right, just like we should. Cause this world it needs a cleansing to burn away the shame and destroy all the remnants of those who are to blame. And we'll stack them up like cordwood, watch them sizzle on the flames for good. Well, as we all just stand in line waiting for some kind of Robin Hood, our liberty will never be until our right to freedom is understood.